If we have a really good information security system where confidentiality and data integrity is maintained and the system is available to authorized users, that really, at the end of the day, means that no unauthorized individual can access any of our data or manipulate any of our data that they shouldn't have access to. Now, if there is a situation where somebody who is not authorized does get access to some system, or they're able to see data or change data, it's very likely that if this individual is malicious, that they leveraged a vulnerability. Now, a vulnerability is nothing more than some weakness that has been taken advantage of to give unauthorized individuals access to information or systems that they shouldn't have. So I'd like to jump in and take a look at some of the reasons why there's vulnerabilities in systems. But before we go to that discussion, let's just run a quick scan. This is Nmap. It's the graphical user interface for Nmap. And let's do a scan of this host at 192.168.1.151. So I'll select it and we'll click on scan, and we'll come back to that in just a moment. So let's talk for a moment why these vulnerabilities, why these weaknesses show up all the time. Number one, we could just have a bug or a flaw in hardware or software that behaves in unexpected ways or behaves in a way that's not secure. So maybe it's allowing a user to do a privilege escalation where the average user gets King Kong rights in the system. Or maybe there's software that's subject to a compromise with an injection attack, or how it's handling the data isn't done securely. Or perhaps there's some security bypasses in place as a backdoor where the developer or the system thought, this is a great idea, we'll put this in, and they forgot to take it out. We could also have ineffective controls that are in place. Maybe we have weak passwords or no passwords required. Or maybe we have data that's stored or being transmitted in clear text. And sometimes we have legacy systems that were built a long time ago, and they're running older protocols that have vulnerabilities that now can be exposed or exploited by current attack tools. And one of the big factors of why we have vulnerabilities is those pesky humans. Because as humans, we are so vulnerable to things like social engineering attacks, where people are taking advantage of our good nature or the idea that we want to help somebody. Or we don't realize that we're being tricked by a link in an email. Or we're being tricked by a fake incoming phone call. Or we may have a process, and part of that process isn't secure. And because new vulnerabilities are being discovered all the time, we have situations where if we have an unpatched system, the OS hasn't been patched, or the applications haven't been patched, if there's a new vulnerability and the attacker knows about that vulnerability, the attacker can then take advantage of that to do unauthorized activity on the network or on the system, whether it's reading the data or modifying the data, or possibly causing a denial of service so that the authorized users no longer have access to that system or to that data. Now, there's a game that we get to play, and this game goes on indefinitely. And it's called Who Can Find the Vulnerabilities First? So part of that is keeping on top of our operating system vendors and application vendors to make sure if they announce a vulnerability or something new that we can analyze it, test it, and then implement it in our networks. Now, in addition to that, a lot of companies are going to be doing vulnerability scanning. And it goes something like this. We get a really good vulnerability scanner software such as Nessus or Nexpose. Those are two of the big ones. And they have databases of all these known vulnerabilities. And so if we're scanning our network for looking for vulnerabilities, if we know we have Cisco and Palo Alto, we have Windows and Linux and so forth, we put the appropriate plugins in the software, and then the scanner scans our systems looking for all these known vulnerabilities. And when it finds them, it gives us a report saying, here's a list of all the issues. And the goal then would be for us to fix those and correct those before an attacker can leverage or use an exploit against those vulnerabilities to compromise our systems. So at the beginning of this video, I started a really quick scan using Nmap, or rather Zenmap, to take a look at the details of one system. Let's take a look at that together. And here's the output. Regarding the scan against this host at 192.168.1.151, if we click on services, here are the services that it found. Found HTTP, has ideas on what version of software it's using. IMAP was found, Java, NetBIOS, SSH, including what it thinks is the flavor of SSH that's being used. So from an attacker perspective, they could look for known vulnerabilities, known weaknesses in those versions of software or the operating system, and then use exploits as compromises against those vulnerabilities to get unauthorized access to that system or to that data. So in this video, we've identified that the concept in data security of a vulnerability represents a weakness. And in that weakness, it might give an unauthorized person, like an attacker, access to do actions with that data or with that system, whether it's reading the data or manipulating the data or destroying the data that the unauthorized individual or the attacker should not have. So in short, a vulnerability is a weakness, and in the next video, we'll continue that discussion with the concept of an exploit that specifically is taking advantage of a known weakness. So I'll see you in that next video. Meanwhile, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.